Hi, I'm Dave Wurzel, and you're watching PHTV4, Living Well. On Living Well, we take a look at a variety of topics related to living a healthy lifestyle. Today, we're going to zero in on a very specific topic, dealing or managing difficult conversations. We're at the center on Southwest Highway in Palos Park. We're talking with Reverend Nancy Nemeth, who's the pastoral director here. Reverend Nemeth, thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you for having me.
We've talked with you before on a variety of topics, including managing stress. But today specifically, a situation that certainly could be stressful, managing like difficult conversations or communicating when it may not be the easiest or best moment to go through that. And I can think of a variety of scenarios just to kind of get us thinking in this way where, we need to communicate with somebody. But it's going to be difficult for whatever reason. Maybe there's a conflict already existing. Maybe it's a topic that we're not comfortable. We have different views or perspectives. Maybe there's an estrangement that's been going on, whether between friends and family. The power dynamic is not in balance. Whatever the case is, communicating is such an important skill, and then managing the communication so that you can come out of it not stressed to the gills, that it's a productive conversation, right? Can you talk to us about, some strategies or techniques in communicating in these types of situations?
So one resource that I'm really excited about is this book by Jefferson Fisher, and it's entitled The Next Conversation, Argue Less and Talk More. I have found this invaluable because he talks about like arguments and how when you have an argument, it's never to win it. You want something to learn, not something to prove. And so his examples are so practical. And he gives 3 steps, and we'll review that. But I just find no matter where you are, whether it's a work situation, family, you have to know how to communicate. So I love what he does. He has podcasts on YouTube and other social media. So I believe it does help to hear, how would that sound if I wasn't emotionally reactive? How would I respond instead?
Maybe we can start there. The way use your term, emotionally reactive, changing the dynamic of the experience. You mentioned earlier, referencing his book, the idea of trying to prove somebody maybe right or wrong, or prove your position, the other person's position is not the right one. How you manage that so that, you listen, and hopefully you can get the other person to at least consider your perspective as well.
I think one of the most important things when you're talking with someone, especially if you have a difference of opinion, is you can be assertive and kind at the same time, but your goal should be to understand the other person. And that tends to diffuse the defensiveness.
So I'm gonna put the challenge to you here then, because in my head I'm thinking, I like the idea of listening to the other person, trying to understand their perspective. I can also imagine thinking like, I'm listening to this person and I'm thinking their view is totally bonkers here. I can't get on board with this. But that doesn't mean I want to be able to function with this person, whether it's as a coworker, a friend, or a family member. So I don't want that negative element out there hanging out. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. The reason why you want to understand at the beginning is for them to know that you're not thinking about the next thing you're going to say to prove them wrong. So that's really important, and that's why understanding is so important. For example, if you and I were to disagree politically, you're not going to change my mind by what you say. So you would say something, if you were saying something I disagreed with, you'd respectfully just say, well, maybe so. And so you're not engaging in an argument. And you're also staying open.
Which you kind of raised an interesting point there in that maybe so that you can acknowledge that they have your belief. There is the message there that I don't necessarily agree with that position. But at the same time, it's not turning into a bigger confrontation, right?
Because you don't have your agenda going. We're not there to convert the other person to our ideas. It's okay to disagree.
Yeah. And agree, excellent point to acknowledge. We can disagree. We can still be friends. We can still be family members who can work together. And then the importance of listening for a person to feel like they're being listened to.
Exactly. And I think the danger is thinking that, how do I say this? You say something with confidence, and you also say it to connect with the other person. And if you get into an argument, that's often going to affect your relationship. And so that's really important. You want to be able to communicate without damaging the relationship.
I would say a key factor, because if you're arguing with each other, you're probably starting to put up barriers and walls to being able to work together, or communicate, or share in some way.
Definitely have an effect. And I think you can be kind and assertive at the same time and speak with confidence. Again, it's not to win an argument, like you have something to prove. It's it's more, hey, I have something to learn from you, and not that, well, you're wrong and I'm right. It's more, we can disagree and still have that relational connection. I think where we run into trouble is when we take things personally.
So let me ask you, and maybe that's an area that we can, kind of pull this together, in that, let's say, I'm going to let you be the good person here. You're going to try and listen. You're going to, say maybe so to me when I'm thinking, but I'm not there. I'm still combative, or I'm still angry, or I'm still confrontational. How do you manage that part of it?
Really good question. A lot of times the other person will want to bait me to respond emotionally. Sometimes the best response is to breathe and just be silent. Let what you're saying just fall to the ground. Because the one thing that you want most from me is for me to react, especially emotionally.
Okay. So there is this element of the other person maybe trying to trigger the response, and they want to go to war over whatever the issue is maybe.
Absolutely, especially if they're unhealthy, especially if they're, wanting to prove something to show that you're right and the other person's wrong. So especially with an unhealthy person, a narcissist, someone who's toxic, someone who is more self-centered.
Okay. So I'm going to use my own personal, I don't have the clinical background. Those seem more like extreme situations when you're dealing with that person. Let's talk about the more gentle, mild ones where, yeah, my wife and I, we love each other, we get along fine, everything's okay, but yeah, we still have some moments, or you're talking with a son or a daughter, or a brother or sister, or a parent, some other relationship where in general it's healthy, everything's okay, but you're still dealing with some of these difficult moments. Can you speak to that a little bit? Does it change the dynamic of how you manage it?
Somewhat and not. I think with a husband-wife, I think one of the things that women struggle with in particular is they just want to be heard. And the other person, typically a male, wants to fix it. And they think more analytically. So I think it's being in tune with the other person, and that person who's sharing their feelings feels heard.
So let's work that scenario, because I could see that apply in a lot of cases. If the husband's trying to fix something, right? The wife is like, no, I just need you to hear me. How does she manage that conversation so she can get the other person like, all right, we're not worried about fixing it. We just need to talk for a little bit.
I think it's really important to directly communicate that. Say, I'm not feeling heard. And so I think it is important to label it and not expect the other person to read, their mind, that they're not connecting. And also saying what you need. Like, I don't need a solution right now. I just want to be heard.
Now, does that same dynamic, would you suggest that strategy or technique when dealing with, whether it's siblings or parents and children, and they might be older children, and it's the same type of thing, where there is an established relationship there, but this is, for whatever reason, a problem conversation?
With children, it's a little different. For example, if a child came home from school, instead of saying, hey, how was your day? What did you learn from school today? You could ask as a parent, what was your favorite thing today? What was the favorite part of today? And that usually gets them going. I think children need to feel like you're interested in them and not neglect that they're important to you, and you want to know, you want to engage with them.
That's a good point. Ask a specific question that leads to a certain type of answer. If you, as a parent, yes, how was your day? It's too easy to say fine, whatever, but if you give them a targeted answer, same strategy, go the other way. What about between like siblings or?
Siblings, that's a good one. Oh boy.
Because and here's to me. And let's talk about adult sibling. Where they again, there's a relationship there, but this is something they disagree on how to handle it or how they're responding to it is differently.
I can bring up an example. A lot of times when we know people well, like siblings, sometimes we can come across really rude, and so say one sibling's being rude to the other. How you could respond is, did you mean that to sound rude? And that's often, they'll say, no, I didn't mean that. And then they'll say what they mean. So that's a strategy. Another way is to, again, I think I said not take it personally and to seek clarity. For example, sounds like you're having a really hard day. One of the things that Jefferson Fisher says is that the person you see isn't the person they are. Like if you're in a store or like you said the sibling, you don't know where they're coming from. Maybe they had a really bad day. Maybe they had a fight with someone else. So it's important to give them grace. Right. And then another way that I've learned is if someone's being rude, not to say anything at all. Again, silence sometimes, most of the time, if it's that heated, is silence, not to say anything at all.
Maybe it's a good moment to not engage in the conversation. If it's that's quite a variety of scenarios we've talked about that probably most people have experienced, I'm going to guess even multiple times in their lives. The sibling dynamic is obviously very different. There's a familiarity to it. In the parent-child, there's a power thing going on,
Families especially, there's a history.
Right.
And a lot of times we have to unlearn behavior. And as we develop and become more adult, we learn healthier ways to communicate. Again, that changes the whole dynamic of the family. That's a lot of where the conflict is, because some members of the family could grow to be healthier, learn the skills, and there's some people that in the family that are afraid to look within and deal with their own problems. And so if they feel that, they tend to project onto another family member because it's too overwhelming for them to deal with themselves, at least in that season of life.
Right. Well, Nancy, thank you very much. A lot of very good advice. I can picture the scenarios. Managing those situations, don't let it be personal. Be specific. Identify what you need in a moment, or how you feel in a moment, or what were they intending in a moment. Listening. It's okay.
Just like what you're doing with me, you summarize what I said. Therefore, I know that you heard me. It's good technique.
Thank you. Well, it was very interesting, and I like the information. So helpful and useful. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
I'm Dave Wurzel, and you've been watching PHTV for Living Well. We've been talking with Reverend Nancy Nemeth about managing difficult communication. Thank you for watching, and be healthy.